How do you reset the NHL after this deadline?
I mean, Vegas now becomes way more dangerous and way more sexy, I suppose, heading down the stretch. I really do think the Hertl trade, I think you got to start with and maybe end with the Hertl trade when you're talking about like the absolute stunners of the deadline. To that point, like they already got Hanifin, they already got Manther. We were already talking about the Vegas Golden Knights being like, they can't keep getting away with this. Then they pull off the Tomas Hertl trade, which it really might be one of the most lopsided trades that I've ever seen.
I disagree on it being a lopsided trade because I think there's risk involved in this. Hertl's numbers haven't been great. At the time, my only reaction to it on the stream was like, the Sharks must think this guy is going to age like already 50-year-old milk. Like they think this guy has to be close to done, that they're paying something like $1.3 million for the next however many years.
6 years.
Just to get rid of the guy. And in 4 or 5 years, you're going to be really annoyed that you're still paying that much. Hopefully the cap will have gone up, that it won't be too prohibitive. But as they're building this next era of their team, right now they have the second to worst record in the NHL. They probably should be getting a top 3 pick. Maybe they get Macklin Celebrini. The fact that they were more than cool with Tomas Hertl, one of their few very good players, being part of this next era, I think said more to me than that they didn't get a lot for him.
No, I think it's more that they probably really regret giving him that deal and wanted to be out from it and not have to pay Tomas Hertl like $8 million for the next 6 years in the middle of a rebuild than it is them being like, we think Tomas Hertl is like a corpse of himself, and so we'll just offload him. Like, if that were the case, I don't think Vegas would be going for that splash and trying to pay him $6+ million per year for the next 6 years. Tomas Hertl is still a really good player, and now if you're the Sharks, you're paying upwards of like $8 million total for Tomas Hertl not to play for your team. You only got a one first round pick, and like not a slam dunk prospect in return. You're retaining money for 6 years, and you sent back 2 third round picks. That's nothing to sneeze at. Like, that is a crazy deal to me.
Again, I think that their move is they dumped Tomas Hertl. More so, like, the first round pick, and a first round pick is a nice asset. Obviously, not a ton of them were traded at the deadline, but like, this by and large was just the Sharks getting away from Tomas Hertl more than it was like trying to maximize the asset. Because if it was trying to maximize the asset, I think they would have let him come back, let him have some improved play. I mean,
but like, if you're the Sharks and you get Macklin Celebrini, if you win the Macklin Celebrini sweepstakes, you're gonna want to pair pretty good players with Macklin Celebrini. Tomas Hertl could have been one of those guys. Like, you could, if they win the Celebrini sweepstakes and they're in a similar position to, say, like the Blackhawks right now, the Blackhawks are probably looking at like, hey, where can we pick up good players and kind of expedite this rebuilding process now that we have a generational piece in the building? And I'm not saying that Macklin Celebrini is guaranteed to be a generational piece, but he's going to be an absolute pillar if he ends up on that team. Like, they're going to want to get guys like Tomas Hertl.
Yeah, but I think and not to build out the Sharks' future lineup, but like, if you get Macklin Celebrini, then your top 2 centers are Logan Couture, if healthy, and
which if
capital
I was
I,
trade
capital
one of those
F,
guys to get rid of his money, it would be Couture, not Hertl.
Right. But those are your top 2 centers, and then from there you go and try to figure out the rest. You got Will Smith coming. But again, I read this more as, and we'd kicked around this idea of, and every time we said it, we were like, it's not going to happen, but like, does this sort of thing make sense? Which was the possibility of teams calling the Blackhawks and saying, hey, eat $1.5 million of Seth Jones's contract. We'll take the rest of it, and we'll give you a little something. We won't give you anything great, but we'll give you something, and then we'll take Seth Jones, so you don't have to spend this huge sum of money on a player as you're trying to go through a rebuild. Every time we said it, We said it wouldn't happen, but we kicked around how it made sense for certain teams, Carolina, et cetera, et cetera. The fact that a deal like this, which has never happened, ended up happening, like stuns me. And I would not have guessed that Hertl would have been that player. Another thing that was thrown around in that vein is the whole Linus Ullmark thing. And there's been... there's like this unspoken thing. It's been reported that he nixed the trade using his no trade clause. We don't know if that's the Bruins coming to him saying, here's a trade, him saying no, or if a team wanted him, but they were on his 16-team list. All we know is he's come out and said, like, this was where I wanted to be. So you could add that up. The team rumored and reported was the Kings, and I can't think of what the Kings were giving the Bruins for Linus Ullmark. Would there have been some sort of like Tomas Hertl type of deal with Pierre-Luc Dubois where they're like, we got to get away from this guy. We're going to pay down $2 million a year on his deal? I would have told you no shot in hell, but maybe this is the kind of thing that's going to become at least a little more common in the NHL.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think that would have been as stunning, like equally as stunning as the Hertl deal.
And I love PLD. I would, as a Bruins fan, I would have just fucking thrown up all night.
Yeah,
get the fuck out of here.
Like the reason why I like PLD in LA is because he's behind.
He's maligned. That's why I like him.
Yeah, fair. But also because like they've got center depth there. They're not leaning on PLD. You know, that's part of the reason why I liked him going there. If he were to come to Boston, people would be looking at him as being like the guy down the middle moving forward, and that's not a great situation to be in. Yeah, I don't know. I'm confused about what happened with the Ullmark situation because there's a lot of people who I like sort of trust speaking very matter-of-factly that like they brought him a deal and he said no and didn't want to go to LA. And I don't know if that's exactly what happened.
Yeah. Again, like, is it they came to him, he said no, or was it a team came to the Bruins and he'd already told them like
here's my 16
get ready to
team,
speak
no trade
Bostonese,
list.
buddy.
Yeah,
this is where I'm gonna play. And
so from what I had heard going around was that like Ullmark has his 16 team no trade list, and that was like the list,
and he was going to stick to it.
And I don't know if it ever ended up getting to a point where they brought a deal to Ullmark and had him say yes or no to this.
It's at least interesting that the Bruins were exploring doing that because deals that they made not involving Linus Ullmark sucked ass.
Yeah.
Although I will say, so they trade Jacob Zaboral, which, no offense, is a pretty inconsequential piece with which to part. 2015 first round pick, had kind of established himself as maybe a depth defenseman, and that's it. And I want to say, was it a 2026 third round pick they sent to Columbus for Andrew Peeke, who's in the first year of a 3-year contract with a $2.75 million cap hit. He'd been being healthy scratched in Columbus, and as Frank Saravalli had put it, was probably on his way to at least being in the buyout conversation. The Bruins actually gave up something for it. They didn't just take him as a dump from Columbus, and where I want to at least give the Bruins the benefit of the doubt, or at least try to get inside their heads, is when we discussed which type of players the Bruins might pursue, my guess was they would try to find a Pavel Zacha type, which is these are going to be your words, not mine, like the change of scenery type, you know?
Yeah, if I had my SpongeBob rainbow,
yep,
that would be a change of scenery.
You
always see those deals.
It was so perfect, and I forget who you said it about, but it applies perfectly here, where maybe they see him as a guy, and because he's tall, I know they see him as this of like, we wanted him his draft year. They just picked ahead of us or something like, or we didn't have a pick, and they like this guy. They think he can be something here. He's a tall guy who blocks shots. I'm not super excited about him, but at least trying to get inside their heads, I bet they think he's a lot better than what he's been in the NHL.
Yeah, and so I was very critical of the Bruins deadline. Not in that I don't think Pat Maroon can bring anything. He's coming off surgery. I'm very skeptical. I'm skeptical to begin with where Pat Maroon is as a player at this point in his career and how much he can help. I know that he has playoff pedigree. I know that he's pretty well liked in a lot of the rooms that he's played in. And it's a low cost of acquisition. So if you want to go out and make that move, by all means. The Andrew Peeke deal, I was a little bit critical of just because of the cost of acquisition. And it's not to say that Andrew Peeke can't be a fine player and can't be serviceable, especially if Derek Forbort can't play. Like, he's essentially a Derek Forbort substitution here. And that's totally fine. You can use those players down the stretch. It was the cost of acquisition. They paid extra to take Andrew Peeke and a bad contract off the Columbus Blue Jackets' hands. Like the Zaboral, whatever. If you want to trade Zaboral for Peeke, that's a totally fair deal in my book. If you're giving up a third-round pick to take a guy who's on the track to be bought out and you have no money retained on the other side, especially by a team like the Columbus Blue Jackets who can do that, that's crazy to me. That's overpaying for a guy that a replacement level player. And I don't think that they needed to do that.
You know which team I think deserves a little love? And yeah, they made a big move on Friday, but I think ultimately when I try to get into the winners and losers conversation, I think of this team as a big, big winner. It's the Winnipeg Jets. Mm-hmm. Because, because when you do the deadline thing, you do also have to consider like teams that have made in-season trades. So like what's better than adding Tyler Toffoli at the trade deadline? Adding Tyler Toffoli at the trade deadline and adding Sean Monahan like a million weeks before that.
That's a good point because Sean Monahan was considered one of the prizes of the center market. And as soon as Lindholm came off the board, Monahan
they got him
then came pretty quickly after that. And so like there wasn't a lot of buzz about them like winning the Sean Monahan sweepstakes. It was them getting like maybe the plan B, but Sean Monahan has fit in really well there. And Tyler Toffoli is just a really good assassin.
I love Tyler Toffoli, and the Jets are not offensive world beaters. So Monahan and Toffoli are prudent assets for them to go out and get. They're 19th in the NHL in goals for per game, which tracks. And if somebody told me they were a little lower than that, I would believe that as well. So what do they need the rest of the way? Improved offense. They're going to get that with Toffoli. And they didn't go like the costs overall this deadline were not crazy. The Jets didn't have to break the bank.
Buyer's market.
Yeah, big time buyer's market. So I really liked the Jets all season as far as acquisitions go. I also like what's that?
America's team.
I also like the Panthers because they got what chaos favorite Kyle Oposo.
Yeah, no, I mean, like Kyle Oposo doesn't move the needle. It's a fine ad. Vladimir Tarasenko is where I thought you were going.
But what I like is that they get the leadership with Oposo, they get the gun power with Vladimir Tarasenko, and now the Panthers, who are the best team in the Eastern Conference. Yes. There's no sort of like they're not coming up behind you anymore. And 2 years ago, President's Trophy, did they win the President's Trophy? Yeah, 2 years ago, President's Trophy winner did not handle being the top dog super well, got bounced in the second round. Last year, no one believed in them. They were written off. They were playing the greatest team ever in the first round, and they made it to the Stanley Cup final. So I'm very interested to see where the Panthers go now that they're back at the front of the Iditarod.
The only thing that I'll say about that is that 2 years ago when they won the President's Trophy, they had a very different makeup than the makeup that they have right now. They scored 1 billion goals. They scored like 4.5 goals per game that year. And it's just not the sustainable approach for playoff hockey.
And the roster is nothing like what it is now. That was Huberdeau. That was Weegar. There was no Kachuk.
I just think that like they've got certainly more bite to them now. They're not like outscoring their problems. They're being driven by their top players who are having incredible years, specifically Barkov and Reinhart. Like that's a really good team.
I like what the Panthers have done. I like what they have done. I like what they have done. Is there any thing you would like to direct people to do?
I would like for them to like the YouTube video that you're watching right now. If you're watching this YouTube video, please hit the thumbs up in the thumbs up icon right below the video player. That's what we call a like spike, folks. In 3, 2, 1, hit that button. That's a like spike. We need to get those numbers up. Also, if you're not subscribed to the channel, please do that now. We are nearing 5,000 subscribers. We tried to get to 5,000 subscribers by the end of the 24-hour stream. We made a lot of progress in that direction, but we're not quite there yet. Please get us there.
We love Duclair to the Lightning. Again, not like the craziest cost. It lets Duclair go on another long playoff run, hopefully, possibly.
We haven't talked about like really Guentzel and Kuznetsov going to the Carolina Hurricanes.
I like that a lot.
Carolina, I owe maybe an apology or two to the Carolina Hurricanes. On Thursday's episode, we did a whole lot of angry spewing at the Carolina Hurricanes for sitting on their thumbs and doing absolutely jack shit during trade deadlines, not improving when for years we've kind of considered the Hurricanes being on the precipice of emerging as the Eastern Conference power, getting to the Stanley Cup final. Obviously, they've made some Eastern Conference finals. Haven't won many games there. Not many Eastern Conference Final Series wins, game wins at all. So we've been waiting for them to add that scoring touch that will show up in the playoffs. And maybe they've finally done it with Jake Guentzel. Maybe Evgeny Kuznetsov helps in that regard as well. But I don't hate them taking a flyer on Kuznetsov for a low, low price. And, you know, Guentzel, we've talked about it so many times. We don't know who he is yet, away from Sidney Crosby. But we do know that he can play with talented players. We know that he can produce, and we know that he can produce in the playoffs. And I think that it's absolutely worth the Carolina Hurricanes making that splash and trying to get a guy who might push them over the top.
We all silly like the mayor.